There are simply popular performers, there are legendary ones, and then there is Michael Jackson at the peak of his career. The scale of this artist was such that it seemed the whole world could fit in the palm of his hand. But the world is a fragile thing. Popular hits, his unique vocals, and incredible choreography were only one side of Jackson's story. The other side was something few could even imagine. In 1993, Michael was accused of molesting a 13-year-old boy. The police launched an investigation. Both sides hired expensive lawyers, and the press unearthed a wealth of sordid details. The astonished public watched what was happening. After all, it's not every day that the world's top star is suspected of pedophilia. The case never went to trial. Jackson paid the victims $20 million, and they dropped the lawsuit. One part of the public decided that the guilty singer simply bought his way out. Another was convinced that the boy's parents had fabricated everything for profit. With a high degree of probability, everything would have gradually been forgotten. But time passed, and new boys emerged, new lawsuits, court proceedings, articles, and documentaries followed. Many biographers of Jackson resort to a somewhat dishonest tactic. They write or film only one side of the artist. For instance, they focus solely on his brilliant songs, the performer's mastery, or the revolution in pop music. Others concentrate exclusively on Michael's personal life, his plastic surgeries, skin bleaching, addictions, and of course, the accusations of molesting minors. However, there were not two Michael Jacksons. There was one unique person, vibrant, talented, and forever changing the history of music. But at the same time, complex, contradictory, and not without flaws. It is this Michael Jackson that I will discuss right now. The Hollywood Walk of Fame is usually crowded. For many tourists from around the world, this is almost the main reason to come to Los Angeles. And the only chance to see Hollywood Boulevard empty is to arrive early. It is now 8 in the morning, as can be judged by my slightly sleepy appearance. And beneath my feet lie 2,000 stars bearing the names of actors, directors, musicians, and other figures from the entertainment industry. Perhaps the longest line forms at Michael Jackson's star. It is difficult to list musicians who have had as significant an impact on the history of world music. Perhaps only the Beatles, or possibly Elvis Presley. Michael aimed to measure up to both of them. Rather, not just to measure up. He sought to be better, grander, and more famous. And in many ways, he succeeded. Los Angeles is the capital of the global music industry. It is here that Michael Jackson became a megastar. Here are the studios where he recorded his songs. Here are the homes where he lived. Here are the streets and buildings where he filmed his music videos. This is where his most dizzying rises and most painful falls occurred. But Michael Jackson's story does not begin here. It begins in a place where palm trees do not grow, where harsh winters prevail, and where the entertainment industry seems distant and unattainable. Gary is a small town in the state of Indiana. Today, it is far from being a prosperous place. Low living standards, high crime rates, and numerous vacant homes and abandoned buildings. Perhaps the main attraction of Gary is a small house built in the mid-20th century. Here lived a large family, parents, and 9 children. Many of them would become popular musicians, and one would become a superstar. In the 1950s, conditions in Gary were slightly better than they are today. Factories and plants were operational, and the city was divided into more and less affluent areas. In the former lived mostly white residents, while the latter was home to African Americans. It was there in the late 1940s that Joseph Jackson built his home. He was a young man with dreams of becoming an actor or a musician. But in a town like Gary, a black boy essentially had three paths: factory work, prison, or death. Joseph predictably chose the first. In 1949, he married a girl named Catherine, and just a year later, they had their first child. This was the first of many, 3 girls and 6 boys. The second to last brother was named Michael. It was 1958. The Jackson family did not live in poverty per se. Rather, they lived very modestly. One of the brothers later recalled that they constantly ate pasta, and as an adult, he could not stand the sight of it. Feeding 9 children is no easy task, so even their mother, Catherine, occasionally had to work as a cashier in a store. The large family squeezed into a small house in an unsafe neighborhood. Catherine and Joseph were strict parents, and as a disciplinary measure, the father sometimes used a belt or even an electrical cord. Michael later spoke about this traumatic experience in rare interviews. In his defense, Joseph noted that the use of force was necessary to ensure the children did not skip school, attended their activities, and returned home on time. In the troubled area of Gary, it was indeed easy to slip into crime. One of the older sons, Tito, was once robbed right outside their home by a teenager with a gun. In the mid-20th century, the Jackson family resembled thousands of other African American families across America, not only in their social status and typical struggles, but also in their love for traditional music genres. Joseph Jackson played guitar in one of the amateur blues bands in the city. One of the older sons, Tito, sometimes took their father's guitar without permission. Other brothers, including little Michael, would gather around and start playing popular songs from well-known soul and R&B artists of the time. Catherine, noticing this, decided not to say anything to Joseph. However, during one of these impromptu concerts, a string on the guitar broke. According to some brothers' recollections, after that, their father beat Tito. Other accounts suggest this is a significant exaggeration. As with many episodes in the Jackson family's life, different members later provided completely different interpretations of the same events. According to the official story of the formation of the Jackson Five, it was their father, Joseph, who was the musical inspiration behind the group. He saw an advertisement in the newspaper for a city talent contest and sent 5 of his sons to participate. The youngest and most vibrant member of the group turned out to be 7-year-old Michael. He was responsible for the vocals. At their first music competition, the newly formed group won by a large margin and earned the right to perform in hospitals and nursing homes. At that time, the group was still called the Jackson Brothers, but it was quickly renamed the Jackson Five. After this rebranding, the group began to gain popularity in their hometown. They performed at new venues, participated in, and won new contests. Gradually, the brothers moved on to the next stage in the career of any young artist. And I am not referring to radio or television, but to concerts in cheap dives. The Jacksons primarily worked at night, performing in between mediocre comedians and third-rate strippers in places where minors were generally not allowed. But the guys won over the audience, and one fortunate coincidence changed everything. Soon, the Jacksons received an offer from the famous Detroit label Motown Records. According to one version, during a nationwide tour, singer Diana Ross, already a Motown star, took notice of the brothers. According to another, it was some other, less well-known employee of the company. Regardless, the family traveled to Detroit for an audition. Footage has survived, possibly the earliest video recording of the Jackson 5, in which, if you look closely, you can see hints of Michael's future stardom. The Motown executives offered the group a contract. This was a major label known for working with African-American artists, and producers were generally reluctant to work with children. They had already had a challenging experience with 12-year-old Stevie Wonder. Working with young artists is not easy. Everything has to be coordinated with their parents, which is a constant source of problems. The only reason the label was willing to offer a contract to the children was if they were truly exceptional. The Jacksons were just that, primarily thanks to Michael. The boy had an excellent voice. He moved rhythmically, but most importantly, he had a unique energy. This energy might very well become the main reason for his future success. It is important to note that the life of an artist, especially a star, is inextricably linked to legal intricacies, contracts, agreements, royalties, fees, and so on. All of this directly impacts their creative destiny, and Michael Jackson's biography is an excellent example of this. We will return to this topic more than once. The first such episode occurred during the signing of that very contract with Motown. Since the performers were minors, all official procedures were handled by their father. And who was Joseph Jackson? A poor worker without an education. He did not have money for a lawyer, and he himself could not thoroughly read the contract. And this became a problem. Joseph wanted to sign a 1-year deal with the label, while the label wanted a 7-year contract. It was pointless for the producers to sign a short agreement. Why invest time and money in artists if they could leave after a year? Therefore, the producers resorted to a trick. They officially signed a 1-year contract, but one of the clauses stipulated that the Jacksons could not work with other labels for another 7 years. Joseph signed without even delving into the details. However, let's not overly demonize the Motown producers. To some extent, they were also taking risks by investing in emerging artists. The group needed original songs written, recorded, and delivered to listeners. That is, they had to invest time and money without any guarantee of success. From this moment on, the lives of the group members changed dramatically. 5 days a week, the brothers attend school, and on weekends, they travel to Detroit to the studio to write tracks and learn. They are taught how to perform on stage, how to move, and how to control their voices. The Jacksons continued to tour with performances in various cities, gradually building interest in themselves. But talent and hard work alone are not enough. The true career of any genuinely popular artist begins with their first major hit, and the group does not have one yet. The song that is destined to become the Jackson 5's biggest success was originally written for other Motown artists. Its lyrics and arrangement were completely different. However, in the end, the whole world would come to know it through the Jackson 5's rendition. The song in question is I Want You Back. This melody has been heard at least once by even those who know nothing about the group. The track appears in almost all compilations of the greatest hits of the 1970s. Technically, the composition was released at the end of 1969 and started off quite modestly on the charts. However, the song quickly gained popularity and reached the highest positions. Critics immediately noted the bright vocals of the young lead singer. The label instantly revved up its marketing machine to full power. The group was organized for numerous performances, including on television. The Jackson brothers' costumes became brighter, their hairstyles more extravagant, and their sound fully aligned with the producer's vision, a slightly sugary but incredibly popular child boy band. At that time, the brothers completely moved to Los Angeles. For them, and especially for Michael, the new city was like paradise. Hollywood, eternal summer, bright flowers, and palm trees. Everything that was missing in their hometown of Gary. However, enjoying the weather was a rare occurrence. Just 6 months after the debut album, Diana Ross presents the Jackson 5. The next record, ABC, was released. Both albums were produced according to the standard formula. Take 1-2 potential hits and add about a dozen mediocre tracks for volume. The brothers recorded in the studio for 12 hours a day, and the rest of the time they toured and continued to learn vocal techniques and choreography. A logical question arises. When do they go to school? Especially the younger members, Marlon and Michael, who were then 13 years old. About a year after moving to Los Angeles, the younger Jacksons were transferred from a regular school to a specialized one. It was attended by children involved in the music or film industry, and the administration was understanding of their frequent absences. In 1971, the family finally bought their own home in a rather upscale neighborhood of Los Angeles. Despite the fact that under the contract with Motown, the Jackson 5 received only a modest percentage of record and concert sales, within a couple of years, the group became so popular that they had enough money for good real estate. The Havenhurst house would become the family residence for many decades. Michael would live there even in the early stages of his solo career, even when he could afford to live anywhere. 6 years earlier, when the Sons had just begun winning contests in Gary, Joseph Jackson wrote in a letter to his brother, "One day, thanks to my kids, I will leave the factory." And he was right. In the early 70s, the Jackson 5 were at the peak of their popularity. They toured, including in Europe, and everywhere they were met by screaming crowds. The overwhelming majority of fans were teenage girls. However, despite Michael being the frontman of the group, the lion's share of attention went to his older brothers. After all, Michael was still just a child. According to producers' recollections, he did not fully understand the meaning of the songs he sang, most of which were about love, and a 12-year-old boy simply could not have that kind of experience. For Motown Records, the Jackson brothers become the main artists alongside Diana Ross. The producers plan to capitalize on the group's success and turn each member into a solo star. Alongside the group's continuously released albums, the label also puts out solo records by Michael, Jackie, and Jermaine. However, the public receives these releases with little enthusiasm. By 1972-73, there is a sense that the popularity of the Jackson 5 is on the decline. At that time, problems also arise in the family's personal life. The older brothers get married and begin to live separately. Joseph is not thrilled with the choice of their brides, but that is not even his main concern. During those years, he often cheated on his wife, and he had a child with one of his mistresses. Upon learning of this, their mother, Catherine, filed for divorce. She would later withdraw the petition. It is from that moment that the relationship between Michael and his father becomes strained. Michael would always refer to him as Joseph instead of Dad. Puberty is a challenging period in the life of any teenager, and for a teenage star, it is 3 times as difficult. Michael begins to worry about his broad nose, acne, and his changing voice. Strangely enough, the last issue will resolve relatively easily over the years. Michael will transition from the bright, boyish soprano of the early Jackson 5 period to an adult tone on his first solo album. However, his large nose and problematic skin will become one of the reasons for numerous plastic surgeries in the future. In the early 70s, Michael does not resort to such radical measures. He simply conceals his flaws with makeup and adopts a vegetarian diet, completely eliminating meat in hopes of improving his skin condition. In 1975, the Jackson 5's long 7-year contract with Motown comes to an end. During this time, the brothers have become experienced musicians, and their style has shifted towards the rising disco trend. Although some of the group's singles still find popularity with dancing audiences, overall, the collective is moving towards a decline. Transitioning from the status of child stars to that of popular adult performers is very challenging. Moreover, the Jacksons want to create their own music rather than just sing material from in-house songwriters, which is not part of Motown's plans. Leaving for another label seems like the most logical solution, but the group is far from the peak of their fame, and the rights to their songs and the name Jackson 5 belong to Motown. In some ways, the Jacksons are fortunate. They catch the attention of a producer from the well-known CBS Corporation. The new label hires different songwriters who create a new sound for the group. There is more rhythmic funk, and the lyrical content of the songs focuses on having a good time. At that moment, Michael is 17 years old, and he has already spent half of his life on stage and in the studio. For many, it is clear that his star potential is far greater than that of the other members of the group. However, the brothers' recent albums are not particularly successful, nor are Michael's solo records. One can be an incredibly gifted vocalist or dancer, or both at the same time, but to become a superstar, one needs truly exceptional, unique material. And Michael will find that in a few years, largely thanks to chance. A few years prior, Motown decided to venture into not just music, but also film production. Their first project was a musical film inspired by The Wizard of Oz. Several of the label's main artists were invited to take on prominent roles: Diana Ross and Michael Jackson, who was cast as the Scarecrow. The film was released in 1978 and flopped at the box office. But that is not what matters. What is important is that during the filming, Michael met a person who would play a significant role in making him a superstar. Quincy Jones was born into a poor family, but thanks to music, he rose very high by the late 70s. He wrote songs for major stars, including Frank Sinatra, and was also a composer for dozens of Hollywood films, including that very Wizard. There, he met Michael Jackson, and they decided to collaborate on his solo album. Jones was slightly over 40, For Jackson, he would become not only a musical mentor, but also, to some extent, a father figure. Everything seemed to be going well. Both were full of ideas and wanted to record a new album. However, a couple of obstacles arose. First, the label did not like Quincy Jones as a candidate. To the bosses, he seemed too jazzy, or to put it less politely, old-fashioned. Furthermore, the producers had no plans to release a solo album for Michael. After all, he was still an active member of the family group, even though Michael himself was not eager to continue collaborating with his brothers. Jackson had long grown into an independent musician who surpassed the other members of the group by leaps and bounds. He spent more time in the studio than anyone else, dedicated more time to choreography, and ultimately, he wanted to become a star more than anyone else. It was time to move on. If the United States is a melting pot, then Los Angeles is one of its epicenters. Stepping out onto the bustling street, you can easily hear speech in dozens of languages and see people of all skin colors. In the late 70s, Quincy Jones and Michael Jackson set themselves a challenging creative task. They wanted to create an album for everyone, music that would unite listeners regardless of their backgrounds and tastes. The result of their efforts, the album Off the Wall, 1979, becomes a significant success. But it still does not fulfill the main objective that Jackson and Jones had set for themselves. Despite excellent sales and Michael's first Grammy Award, this record did not achieve a qualitative breakthrough. It merely established him as a star in R&B and soul music, but did not make him a global megastar beyond those genres. They needed something more. In working on the next album, the musicians did not intend to limit themselves by any boundaries. They wanted the record to feature a wide variety of tracks that would harmoniously complement each other. After gathering several excellent compositions, Quincy realizes that they still lack that one song that would break the racial barrier, one that would appeal to a broad white audience that prefers rock. The producer begins searching for a composition in that style, and Michael brings him the idea for a rhythmic rock track. Jones really likes the idea, and they immediately start working on it, resulting in the song Beat It, featuring an energetic solo by guitarist Eddie Van Halen. Just yesterday, Michael Jackson was singing lively disco, and now his new album includes such a hard-hitting rock anthem. The third major hit of the album was a track titled Starlight Love. Moreover, initially, that was supposed to be the name of the entire album. The song's author, Rod Temperton, had named the previous album Off the Wall, so they were counting on him again. But one morning, Temperton wakes up with an idea. Thriller, a title that would look great on a poster, and what looks great on a poster is a great title. Rod urgently rewrites the lyrics. The composition transforms into a horror theme, and to enhance the effect, the musicians decide to invite the famous horror film actor Vincent Price. It is his ominous voice that belongs to the narration. From the outside, it may seem that the work on Thriller, which was destined to become legendary, resembled creativity without limits. Jackson and Jones were experimenting with sound and genres, inviting top musicians, writing and rewriting songs, but in reality, they missed all possible deadlines. CBS Corporation postponed the album's release dates multiple times. The company was not in the best financial shape, and they were eagerly awaiting this hit. Finally, by the fall of 1982, the recording of the album was completed. On the day they finished working on it, Michael, Quincy, and Rod Temperton stepped out of Westlake's studio and took a memorable photo. The snapshot was taken almost in the same spot where I am standing now. In front of me is the studio building, and behind it is a Taco Bell restaurant, which, by the way, is still in operation. Looking at this photo out of context, it is hard to believe that it captures people who have just completed work on one of the greatest albums in music history. The album Thriller was released 2 days earlier than planned due to a leak. One radio station began playing songs from it on air even before the official release. However, not all stations shared this excitement. Some, targeting a white rock audience, did not want to include Beat It in their rotation. To them, Jackson was an artist from another planet. Moreover, there was even an issue with the progressive channel MTV, which initially did not want to air the video for Billie Jean. According to one version of events, the head of CBS resolved the issue. In anger, he called the head of MTV and threatened to pull all the corporation's artists from their airwaves if the channel did not play Billie Jean. Additionally, several well-known artists, such as David Bowie and Miles Davis, came to Michael's defense. As a result, the video made it onto MTV. The network still claims that there was no racial issue and that they did not hinder the video's release. But nonetheless, in 1983, Billie Jean held the title of the most popular video on MTV for several months. The music videos for several tracks from Thriller were a significant factor in the overall success of the album. The clips for Beat It, Billie Jean, and Thriller brought about a true revolution in the music video genre. Each of them features a storyline, intricate choreography, special effects, and a high budget, creating the complete sensation of watching a short musical film. All these elements are most vividly showcased in Thriller. After the release of Billie Jean and Beat It, Michael was initially reluctant to shoot anything else, but his manager Frank DeLeo persuaded him the new videos were greatly boosting album sales. At that time, Jackson was still living with his parents in that very house on Havenhurst. The famous director John Landis came over to discuss the concept for the new video. According to eyewitness accounts, Michael's room was a small space cluttered with boxes and various junk. Jackson proposed the idea of turning the video into a mini horror film. The director wrote the script and a budget was drawn up, resulting in a cost of around $1 million for the video. Today, that amount may not seem significant, but in 1983, $1 million was approximately 20 times more than the most expensive music video at that time. Michael's label refused to pay such an amount. The producer's strong argument was, who needs a music video with monsters? Ultimately, the budget was raised through creative means. Jackson's team filmed a documentary about the making of the video and sold the rights to it, covering a significant portion of the expenses. Such an expenditure is quite understandable when you watch the full version of Thriller. It lasts 13 minutes and resembles a full-fledged horror film, complete with numerous actors, makeup, and other costly elements. Behind me is the very house from the Thriller video. It's a great place to tell the story of how Michael Jackson almost destroyed all the footage that had been shot. Imagine a huge budget spent, filming completed, the director ready to edit the video, And then Jackson calls his lawyer and demands that the tapes be destroyed. The thing is, the Jehovah's Witnesses somehow found out that Michael was making a video about werewolves and zombies, and they threatened to excommunicate him from the church. Upon learning this, Landis barricaded himself in his office with all the tapes and refused to come out until the situation was resolved. Later, Jackson apologized and acknowledged that the video turned out great. However, the full version ultimately included a small disclaimer at the beginning, stating that the film does not promote belief in evil forces. It's fortunate that the tapes were not destroyed at that time, as the video became not only an important event in Jackson's career, but also one of the symbols of the 1980s. Before Michael released the album Dangerous in the 90s, he recalled the composer Tchaikovsky. "Look at the Nutcracker," Jackson would say. "There are no filler numbers. Every part of the ballet is a hit. That's how my album should be." Whether Dangerous became such an album is a debatable question, but Thriller certainly did in the early 80s. 7 out of the 9 songs on the album made it into the top 10 of the music charts. 3 music videos for these songs sparked a revolution on MTV. The album itself became the best-selling record in history, and this time, not just among black artists, but among all artists worldwide. Riding the wave of success from Thriller in 1984, Michael Jackson became the world's biggest star. In the few years that passed from the release of Off the Wall to the dizzying triumph of Thriller, his appearance changed significantly. Michael lost a lot of weight, a result of strict vegetarianism and grueling dance rehearsals. His voluminous afro hairstyle was a thing of the past. He had grown up and changed his style. The new shape of his nose was the result of several plastic surgeries. It had been significantly reduced. Makeup artists noted the small scars on his face. 10 years later, in a famous interview with Oprah Winfrey, Michael would say that the reason for his plastic surgery was the demands of the profession. According to him, there is no one in show business whose face has not been worked on by a surgeon. Perhaps this is true, but only in part. Surely one of the motivations for reducing his nose was a childhood trauma. His brothers teased Michael by calling him Big Nose, and he himself constantly worried about its size. After the success of Thriller, it became clear that it was time for Michael to embark on his first major solo tour. However, his brothers persuaded him to go on tour with them as well. This time, Michael was firmly determined to refuse. For Joseph Jackson and the others, this was a problem. Their previous tour had not been very profitable, and album sales were lacking. But the family had already become accustomed to living and spending like true stars. The financial success of the upcoming tour could only be guaranteed by Michael's participation, yet he continued to refuse. Then the brothers resorted to their secret weapon. They involved their mother. After a conversation with Catherine, Michael agreed. One way to make the tour profitable was to secure a sponsorship deal with a brand. Pepsi was ready to step in. Under the terms of the contract, the brothers and Michael were to appear in a series of television commercials. It's important to understand that in the early 80s, the perception of stars appearing in advertisements was different. After the overwhelming success of Thriller, Michael gained many friends among top celebrities, and many of them warned him upon hearing about Pepsi's offer. It's advisable to start doing commercials when your career is on the decline. But Michael's was on the rise. Nevertheless, he agreed. Pepsi offered a huge sum, $5 million. For comparison, a year earlier, Coca-Cola spent less on sponsoring an entire Olympics. Of course, such amounts were promised only on the condition that Michael himself would appear in the commercials. During the filming of one of the commercial clips, an accident occurs. According to the script, pyrotechnics were supposed to explode near Michael, and it was positioned too close. In one of the takes, Michael's hair catches fire. He is immediately rushed to the hospital. According to Jackson's plastic surgeon, the burn was very severe, the size of a palm. Michael underwent surgery, during which something resembling an implant was placed under his skin. This incident would have a significant impact on his life. There would be more than one surgery ahead, and the burn area would need to be covered with hairpieces. But most importantly, Michael would suffer from severe pain, and it is possible that this moment marked the beginning of his gradual dependence on painkillers. After the incident, Pepsi paid Jackson $1, $5 million in compensation, and he allocated the entire amount to establish a burn center in Los Angeles. By the way, this would be the first of many charitable acts by Jackson. Just a year later, he would write the famous song, "We Are the World." The creation of the track would involve dozens of top artists of the time: Bob Dylan, Stevie Wonder, Tina Turner, and many others. Thanks to the sales of the song, they managed to raise $60 million in aid for African countries that were suffering from famine at that time. In 1984, the Jacksons' tour titled Victory kicked off. Prior to this, there had been 7 months of grueling rehearsals. Michael constantly suggested ideas for staging, set design, lighting, and effects. In short, he did not want to go on tour, but perfectionism has no off switch. The traditional goal of the tour was to promote the new album by the Jacksons, also called Victory. However, not a single song from that album was performed at the concerts. For most of the show, each brother sang his own composition with his own musicians. Between cities, Michael flew separately on a private jet. At the final concert of the tour in Los Angeles, Michael delivered a farewell speech. He reflected on their shared journey and stated that it had been a long 20 years. Not happy 20 years, not wonderful 20 years, but long ones. This time, Michael was ready to put a definitive end to their collaborative creative biography. By the mid-'80s, Jackson's public image changed dramatically. At that time, a British tabloid gave Michael the derogatory nickname Wacko Jacko, from the word wacko, meaning crazy. This expression stuck with Jackson for a long time. The reasons were not only his changing appearance, but also his increasingly strange and extravagant behavior. Despite his superstar status, Michael decided to minimize all contact with the press. He hardly gave interviews. In his opinion, this would be beneficial, adding an air of mystery to the artist and thereby increasing interest. However, the press began to circulate the most incredible rumors. For example, that Jackson had bought the skeleton of the Elephant Man, a famous freak show from the 19th century, and kept those bones at home. Michael called this an absolute fabrication. Additionally, publications circulated a photograph of the singer in a hyperbaric chamber. Supposedly, he slept in it to extend his life to 150 years. Jackson responded that this was complete nonsense, and in this case, he was absolutely right. The whole story about the hyperbaric chamber was concocted and staged by him along with his manager, DeLeo. They leaked the photo to one of the publications. The sensational news was immediately picked up by other newspapers, and the image in the hyperbaric chamber spread across tabloids worldwide. In addition, the public begins to wonder what is happening with the artist's skin color. It is becoming significantly lighter. Does he want to bleach himself? Michael does not comment on this, at least not for now. And of course, when discussing Michael's oddities, one cannot overlook his animals. Over the years, Jackson had a ram, a dog, a giraffe, a snake, a llama, and this is far from the complete list. Initially, he set up a small zoo right in his parents' house on Havenhurst, but it would fully expand when he purchased his own ranch, Neverland. A special place in this story is held by a monkey. Technically, it is not a monkey, but a chimpanzee. But that is beside the point. In the mid-'80s, Michael begins to appear in public with it. He takes the animal to important meetings, music video shoots, studio recording sessions, international trips, and even sends a personal car with a driver for the chimpanzee if he cannot pick it up himself. The chimpanzee is named Bubbles, and he becomes not just a pet for Michael, but a true friend, despite sometimes aggressive behavior. Bubbles broke equipment in the studio, disrupted recordings, and caused a lot of inconvenience. Jackson got the chimpanzee while still living on Havenhurst, despite his mother's protests. Later, he moved Bubbles to Neverland, but ultimately gave the aggressive pet to a special sanctuary. One of the reasons for Bubbles' presence was Jackson's immense love for animals. Another was his desire to create the right hype around himself. After the success of Thriller, Michael decided that his entire life was a big show, and part of that show included such extravagant stories. This was how he planned to control the press. And at first, he even succeeded. But soon the roles reversed, and it was the press that began to control Michael. Some would later say that Jackson's decline began after Thriller. Perhaps they would be right, but such a statement could only be made years later. In the mid-'80s, everything looked different. Jackson was still at the top. On the mirror in his bathroom, he writes the number $100,000. This is how he envisioned the sales goal for his next album, 100 million copies, more than any album sales in history at that time. At the top of the musical Olympus, it is always restless. Just as you manage to secure your position, new artists try to dethrone you. Fresher, bolder, more provocative. Gradually, in the second half of the '80s, Jackson, even with all his quirks, begins to seem almost conservative compared to rising stars like Madonna or Prince. By the way, the press often referred to the latter as Michael's creative rival. The artists would attempt to record a collaborative track for Jackson's new album, but the collaboration would not materialize, possibly due to mutual dislike, which was widely discussed at the time. Michael certainly feels the pressure from new popular artists. He knows that the only way to stay on top is to offer the public something new music, and a new version of himself. Jackson continues to work with Quincy Jones and his team, but at the same time, he is fully engaged in creating new tracks at his home in Havenhurst with his own team. This time, he wants the majority of the album's compositions to belong to him. The songs created by Michael's team do not appeal to Jones. He considers them too raw. The tracks proposed by Jones do not resonate with Michael. He is convinced that the producer is stagnating and does not feel the pulse of the times. Jackson wants a more aggressive new sound. In 1987, the album Bad was released. Even its title and cover seem to scream the artist's desire to show that he is not a conservative, that he is changing. By the way, Michael's face on the poster is also quite different. His nose is even thinner, and his skin is even whiter. These changes are especially noticeable when comparing the cover of Bad with that of the previous album. For the filming of the music video for the title track, the iconic director Martin Scorsese is invited. The result is an 18-minute short film. The plot is based on the true story of a black student who was shot by a police officer in a troubled neighborhood of New York City. And although Michael tries to incorporate social and racial context into the video, the reaction from critics and audiences is mixed. Some note that Jackson has long been living a different life and is clearly far removed from the pressing issues of urban underclass. And considering all his extravagant antics, there is some truth to these words. The reaction from the label's producers to the video is also mixed. The music is great, they say, but what's going on with his face? Against the backdrop of Thriller, the album Bad certainly falls short, and its sales reflect this. However, it is a striking example of the saying that the best is the enemy of the good. If you remove Thriller from the equation, Bad objectively stands out as a very successful album, both financially and creatively. Half of its songs topped the charts. Global sales of the album reached several tens of millions of copies. For Michael himself, Bad is, to some extent, the pinnacle of his creativity. 9 out of 11 tracks are written by him, either solely or in collaboration. In many compositions, Jackson achieved the aggressive sound he desired. For example, the provocative Dirty Diana about a rock star and a fan, or the hard-hitting Smooth Criminal about a crime on the street. In contrast, another song from the album, Man in the Mirror, stands out as a much calmer composition with a positive message. If you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and make a change. The extensive world tour in support of the album Bad was particularly significant for Michael. It was his first major solo tour. Here, his perfectionism was fully on display. He meticulously selects his team of musicians. For instance, from several hundred guitarists, only one remains. Everything that happens on stage during the concert is also under Michael's control. Lighting, sound, effects, costumes, and perhaps the most important element, choreography. Throughout the 2-hour performance, Jackson is constantly in motion. He masterfully executes all those elements that are now exclusively associated with him, even though many were conceived long before him. The most striking example is the moonwalk. This move was used long before Michael by both American performers and French mimes. For instance, there are recordings from the 1950s. However, today, any mention of the moonwalk brings to mind only the image of Michael Jackson. All of Michael's efforts and those of his vast team of musicians, dancers, and stage workers pay off immensely. Jackson's first solo tour becomes a resounding success. Over 4 million tickets sold, with prices reaching $700 among scalpers, a considerable sum even today, and enormous by the end of the 80s. For Jackson, the success of the tour is doubly important as it embodies the quintessence of his creative vision. Jackson's concerts around the world continued for 16 months. During the tour, it became evident that he surrounded himself with a small group of people with whom he primarily interacted. For the other participants and workers, Michael was unattainable. However, what caught the attention of some managers and colleagues was not this fact, but that Jackson's entourage included boys around 10 years old. These could have been the children of those Michael worked with or kids who were directly involved in projects with him, for example, appearing in commercials. Sometimes the boys traveled with their parents, sometimes without. Michael's circle then split into two camps. One half believed there was nothing wrong with this. Yes, it might be unconventional, but Michael is like a Peter Pan, a boy who doesn't want to grow up. He didn't have a full childhood, and now he is making up for it, goofing around with kids, playing pranks with them, watching movies, and engaging in other typical activities for 10-year-olds. In short, all of this seemed harmless. Another part of Jackson's team began to be seriously concerned about this situation. Among them was Michael's longtime manager, Frank DeLeo. Although he himself admitted that he had not seen any illegal actions on Michael's part regarding the boys and his entourage, it all appeared very strange from the outside. He rightly warned that this could become a significant problem in the future. No one would care whether anything actually happened or not. But if the boys said something did, everyone would believe them rather than Michael. In this regard, the manager had a glimpse into the future. Immediately after the tour ended, Michael fired DeLeo. The Bad Tour concluded in 1989, marking the end of many things in Michael's career. In addition to his manager, he parted ways with Quincy Jones and most of his old team. Jackson himself was convinced that Jones wanted to move on as well. For his part, Jones perceived the breakup as a completely unexpected event. A year earlier, in 1988, Michael purchased the famous Neverland Ranch in California, north of Los Angeles. The property cost the singer approximately $20 million. The estate is named after the fictional place from the story of Peter Pan. In fact, the vast expanse of the ranch resembles a giant amusement park for children, a huge movie theater that showcased Hollywood blockbusters before their theatrical release, a zoo with giraffes, lions, elephants, and other animals, rides, pools, and so on. Once the ranch was ready, Michael began inviting many of his celebrity acquaintances and children there. Among the latter were famous personalities like Macaulay Culkin, the star of the Home Alone films, as well as unknown boys whom Michael encountered by chance. Later on, what transpired at Neverland would become the source of major scandals. But at that time, no one was thinking about that. At the end of the 80s, Jackson's contract with CBS came to an end. Michael and his manager negotiated even more favorable percentages from album sales and larger fees. In short, they secured a contract that had never been offered to any artist in history before. Michael's new album, titled Dangerous, was released in 1991. Jackson once again experimented with a new sound. Instead of his old team, new musicians, sound engineers, and producers were brought in. The songs featured elements of rock, funk, and even the influence of the hip-hop trend that was popular at the time. The most famous track from the album became Black or White. The meaning of this song is clear even from its title. It is about equality and the idea that skin color does not matter. The album immediately topped the charts upon its release, but at that moment, it was not perceived as a significant artistic victory. Firstly, the record fell short compared to Michael's previous albums. Additionally, there was a sense that the new music and Jackson's entire image did not quite align with the times. One critic wrote in his review, "An album that tries to please everyone from a person who has everything." At the same time, radio stations in the minds of the general public were captivated by unkempt rock, with the young band Nirvana being its main representative. To be fair, over time, the perception of dangerous changed, and for the better. Many critics noted its musical innovations, which were complemented by lyrics in which Michael sang about what truly concerned him. Around that same time, Jackson presented an unusual idea. He demanded that he be referred to everywhere as the King of Pop. According to some employees of the record label, the suggestion initially sounded strange and even elicited smiles. However, after a while, the phrase caught on and began to be associated specifically with Michael. Michael's new tour, the Dangerous Tour, becomes even larger and more grandiose than the previous one. The stage design and effects are of incredible scale. To transport all the necessary equipment for the tour, the producers had to rent 3 huge Soviet cargo planes. Each show of the tour opens with a spectacular effect. Michael is unexpectedly shot up from beneath the stage by a special mechanism. The audience literally goes into a frenzy. Then Jackson simply stands silently in one pose for several minutes. During this time, the crowd roars. It's hard to find another artist in history who could hold the attention of tens of thousands of people just by standing on stage. From the very first song, Jackson moves actively throughout the entire performance. He loses 8 to 9 kilograms of weight with each concert. On the advice of doctors, Michael even has to give up vegetarianism. He needs protein. During the tour, Jackson periodically flies to America, for example, to perform in front of the president or to give an interview to Oprah Winfrey. This interview marked Michael's first major interaction with a journalist in 10 years. Jackson agreed to it, not out of a good situation. He and his team of producers understood that his popularity was gradually waning, and it was necessary to remind the public who the true King of Pop was. The content of the conversation is not particularly interesting. Michael skillfully avoids typical questions or repeats stories he has told about his childhood long ago. What is curious in this conversation is how Jackson speaks and appears before the audience. The global superstar, whose songs and movements on stage are always energetic, turns out to be quite a shy person with a soft voice in real life. However, the most striking aspect is, of course, Michael's appearance. He is even paler and his nose is even smaller. When asked how many plastic surgeries he has had, Michael replies, "Just a couple." Here he is, of course, being somewhat disingenuous, as even just his nose has been under the surgeon's scalpel more times than one can count, not to mention other parts of his face. Finally, when asked about the color of his skin, Michael publicly shares for the first time about his condition, vitiligo, a skin pigmentation disorder. Gradually, certain areas of his body become significantly lighter. The first signs of the disease appeared in Jackson in the early 80s, and because the depigmentation was uneven, he had to lighten his skin entirely to make it uniform. The interview draws an incredible 90 million viewers to their screens, and it surely would have attracted even more if it had aired 6 months later. At that time, Michael would have been accused for the first time of molesting a minor. It all began a year earlier, in the summer of 1992. Michael's car breaks down during a trip through Los Angeles. The owner of the car rental service, Dave Schwartz, provides the artist with one of his vehicles. That day, Dave was accompanied by his wife June and her 13-year-old son from a previous marriage, Jordan Chandler. A few months after this incident, Jackson invites the parents and Jordan to his Neverland ranch. This would not be the only visit from the Chandler family to Michael's estate. During these visits, the teenager meets other boys there, including Macaulay Culkin. As during his tours, Michael plays around with the children, including in his bedroom and on his bed. Jackson also takes Chandler and his mother to Disneyland and Monte Carlo. Gradually, the boy's biological father, Evan Chandler, begins to suspect something is amiss. He asks his son if the singer has made any advances toward him. Jordan replies that nothing of the sort happened. However, Evan is not satisfied with this answer and consults a psychiatrist who expresses the opinion that Michael may have exhibited inappropriate behavior toward the teenager. Interestingly, the psychologist draws these conclusions not based on the boy's own words, but rather from how the father described his son's trips to Jackson. In response, Michael states that Evan Chandler harbors animosity toward him simply because Michael does not wish to communicate with him, maintaining contact only with his wife and son. Evan Chandler decides to file charges against Jackson. To resolve the matter before it goes to court, he demands $20 million from Michael. Jackson refuses. It is important to mention that Evan was a dentist by profession, and he treated his son as well. During one of the procedures to remove a tooth, Jordy Chandler is lying in his father's office under anesthesia. Evan decides to ask his son in this state if Michael had made any advances toward him, and Jordy responds that he did. After this, Evan takes his son to a psychologist. There, the teenager confirms the statements made under anesthesia and provides detailed accounts of how Jackson had allegedly abused him. An official investigation begins. In August 1993, a group of police officers arrives with a search warrant at Jackson's Neverland Ranch and his apartment in Los Angeles. The police thoroughly examine everything, including amateur videotapes, but find nothing illegal. Jackson learns about the search the next day while performing in Moscow. Naturally, the press is actively following the developments. Tabloids try to track down children who have ever interacted with Jackson, interviewing ranch staff and other potential witnesses, offering large sums of money for interviews. For instance, a couple who worked at Neverland claims to journalists that they saw Michael making advances toward children, including swimming naked with them in the pool. Later, the police will find out that these former employees were paid for their interview and did not actually witness any misconduct. Jackson did indeed swim with children in the pool, but everyone was clothed and nothing illegal occurred. Michael builds his public defense. He asks several familiar children to speak to the press and say that he did nothing wrong. The most well-known of Michael's witnesses becomes Macaulay Culkin. Both at that time and many years later, he always publicly supports Jackson and states that everything that happened at Neverland was within the bounds of decency, and certainly within the law. Yes, Jackson had fun and played around with children, including in his bedroom at the ranch. But you have to understand what Michael's bedroom in Neverland is like, says Culkin. It's a huge room, and there's always someone from the staff walking around. Teenagers Wade Robson and James Safechuck also come to Michael's defense. They confirm that Jackson is innocent. Interestingly, both would later file accusations against Michael 20 years later and become the subjects of the documentary Leaving Neverland. Jackson also has to undergo a humiliating procedure, detailed photography and examination of his body in the nude. The police compare this data with the testimony of Jordy Chandler. The results turn out to be contradictory. Some parts of Chandler's descriptions match, while others do not. 6 months later, Jackson agrees to pay $23 million, and the prosecution withdraws the lawsuit. Some of Michael's entourage believe that the decision to buy his way out was the right one. Everything that had happened had already taken a significant toll on Jackson. Others, on the contrary, felt that Michael made a mistake. He should have seen it through to the end and proven his innocence. Otherwise, there was a great risk that new boys would come forward with accusations in the future. Clearly, the latter group was correct. Moreover, part of the large audience following the case was now convinced that since Jackson chose to resolve the matter with money rather than go to court, he must be guilty. Even many of those who believed in Michael began to feel after